Hello everyone. I hope all of you can hear me. Can you please confirm the same in the questions panel? If you could just type yes in the questions panel, I'll know that all of you can hear me. Okay, thank you for these confirmations. Uh, thank you, thank you G2, thank you Yash. Thanks for the confirmations. Okay, all right, wonderful. So welcome again in today's another Quantincy webinar. And I see that a lot of you have joined from various countries across the globe. And there are also some of you who are new to Quantincy and attending their first Quantincy webinar. So for those of you who are new to Quantincy, we are an algorithmic and quantitative trading research institute that has a user base in more than 200 countries plus territories. So yeah, uh, and we have various educational initiatives around algorithmic and quantitative trading. So one of them is obviously these webinars that we regularly do. All right. So for today's topic, we have here with us Vivek Krishnamurthy. So about today's topic, get started with algorithmic trading from Python installation to backtesting your first strategy. So this is going to be a very first step or basic algo trading webinar that will help you from the scratch, like from the very beginning of how to install Python and then how you can go ahead and backtest your own trading strategy. So we'll try to cover all of this basic in this presentation. So, a quick introduction to Vivek. So, Vivek is the head of content and research at Quantincy, and Vivek teaches participants data analysis and building quant strategies and time series analysis using Python. He has over 15 years of experience across India, Singapore, and Canada in academia and research industry. And he is also a co-author of book Python Basics and another one that is called Rough and Ready Guide to Algorithmic Trading, which also recently got published on Amazon. All right, so yeah, so without a further ado, I would like to pass the presentation rights to Vivek. And Vivek, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Shitish. So before I go ahead, I will do my customary sound check. So I am looking at your chat. I'm looking at the chat window right now. So if you guys can hear me, can you just type your favorite color? Or you can just type yes, that's fine. Okay. All right. Okay. Great. So yeah, nice. Yes, red, blue. Cool. Okay, I can see one of my friends, Prakasham, is online. Hello, hi there. Okay, so cool. Let's begin. Thank you, guys. I think it looks like I'm audible, so I'm going to get started. So first things first, for those of you who are from Asia, that is the Indian subcontinent or the Middle East or Far East, thank you. I think it's at the end of a workday, or you must be nearing the end of a workday, and you've still logged in for this. So I hope I can make it worth your while you're here. And for those of you who are from the western part of the planet, I guess it's the first half of your day. And again, good morning, good afternoon, based on wherever you've logged in from. So let me now put my screen on presentation mode. All right. So as my colleague Kshitij said, my name is Vivek Krishnamurthy, and what we are going to try and do today is we are going to get started with algo trading. We'll talk a little bit about Python installation, and we'll also towards the end of this session, we are going to do a little bit of back testing of a couple of strategies, right? So there's a customary disclaimer that I want to put out there. that any kind of investments in the financial markets involves risks, and whatever I present here is specifically for educational or informational purposes. Any kind of investment decisions you make, please make sure that you do a thorough analysis of all the risks and assessments that you need to do before you engage in any kind of trading in the markets. All right. Okay. So as far as today's agenda goes, you have it right there on your screen. I'll talk a little bit about us. I'll give you a short background about myself, what the objectives of today's session are. We'll get on to talking about installing Python in our systems, some of the key libraries that we use when we start using it for financial market data analysis. There's some stuff that we're going to try on market data using the Pythonic way. I'll talk a little bit about the steps that we follow to build a quant trading strategy and the kind of data that we use in order to do that. We'll also backtest a specific trading strategy on our respective, also on my workstation. So this is not one of those sessions where I want you guys to walk along with me while we do this. This is more a case where I want you to watch as I demonstrate stuff, because we planned quite a bit in this 1 hour that we are together. And so it's best, our time is best served if you guys spend more time watching what I do, and we can you know, talk a little bit about the interpreting the results and the output that we get. Once we do the back testing, we're also going to then take it up a notch by trying out a trading strategy on Blueshift, which is a cloud-based research and trading platform. And towards the end, I'm going to talk about the stuff I haven't covered, such as, is this what it takes to actually go on to become a systematic or a quant trader? The short answer is no. I'll also talk about the fine print, the things that I have not touched upon, or the things that we've papered over today, we will paper over today. And I'll eventually conclude it with some final words. All right. You'll notice that there are different colors on this slide, and that's because some parts are going to be via a slide deck, and I might open a couple of browser tabs to show stuff. The orange parts are where I'm going to run it as code on a specific Jupyter notebook. That's for those of us who haven't programmed before in Python. It's a specific way by which we access Python. All right. And the green parts are going to be on the cloud platform that I just mentioned a few seconds ago. All right. So let me first talk about us. We are iRage and Quantinsti. So we are two closely linked firms, sister concerns, one would say. And where iRage Capital is one of the largest high-frequency trading firms in India. We are market makers for many of the F&O traded contracts on the Indian exchanges. And Quantinsti is its research and training arm. Now, Quantinsti, under its umbrella, has primarily 3 products. The first is the EPAT, which is like a 6-month instructor-led course, which is a pretty immersive experience into the world of quant and algo trading. So you start right from the basics, and then you amp up quite a bit over the months. And by the end of 6 months, you'll find that you have been exposed to nearly every corner of this pretty intense field. It's a pretty challenging kind of course. The lectures happen essentially over the weekends on Saturdays and Sundays, and participants put in efforts through the weekdays. All right, so that working professionals also can take up courses like this. Quantra, on the other hand, are self-paced courses, so they I would say are much more defined, because the scope of each topic is much smaller. Where the time devoted to each course varies from about 2 to about 15 hours. They are kind of bite-sized courses. One would call them, what we popularly call MOOCs, that is massively open online courses. And Blueshift, which is the third product that we have, is essentially a research and trading platform, which is entirely based on is entirely cloud-based, which also we are going to see a little bit of today. Right. there's been a short introduction about me was anyways given by my colleague Kshitij. So I head the research and content team here at Quantenstein. I have about 15 years of experience. I've kind of spent time in both industry and academia. I've co-authored a couple of books. And by way of educational qualifications, I've essentially played the engineering MBA riff, which was quite popular about 10, 15 years back. I'm not sure whether it is still today, but yeah, back when I finished my bachelor's, this was pretty popular for people of my kind of background. And well, like most folks back then, I also went ahead and did that. All right, so now is the time for me to send you guys a short poll. So it's going to tell me a little bit about your backgrounds. So let me click on it. So this poll essentially is about understanding your professional background. It's going to help me understand the audience that I'm talking to. So I'm going to click on launch, and I'll give you guys about a minute to click whatever suits you best. Yeah, I can see that about 7%, 8% of you have voted. Okay, it's about 80% of you. A few more. That'll be nice. Okay, so I'm going to close it in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and done. All right, great. Cool. So interestingly, I see that about half of you are trading for themselves. About a quarter of you have some programming background, and some of you guys I see are also about 1/6 of you guys are data analysts or financial analysts, and around 10% are students. So I see overwhelmingly that we are having a bunch of traders here, self traders, people who are trading with their own investments and own money. Okay, interesting. All right, let me go back to my presentation. All right. So specifically to do with the objectives of this entire session, the idea is to give you like a short tour of the most popular tools that are used in algo trading. I'm not going to get into why they're used and things like that. I presume that this audience is already familiar with the fact that programming languages have kind of made their entry, and they've been around in the financial world now for a few years. And so we are going to literally get into what it is and what's used, and we'll even try our hands at doing a little bit of stuff on these on a programming environment. All right, so we'll touch upon Python and its data science stack. We'll talk about some of the additional libraries used in quant finance and algo trading. We'll do a little bit of back testing, and we'll do some stuff on the cloud. All right, cool. So let me first start with installing Python. So essentially, if you were to do a web search on installing Python, there are broadly two ways by which you go about doing it. One is to do it directly. So Python happens to be an open source language. So first of all, you're not making any license fee when you download its absolute vanilla version. So you could go to a python.org and download and install it on your computers. However, what that does is it just installs the core language and not many of the, I would say, surrounding libraries, which is what makes it such a powerful language in today's day and age. which is why you will find that most people choose the second option, which is to install it via distributions. There are many choices for distributions here. I've mentioned a handful here: Anaconda, Miniconda, PyCharm, ActiveState. So what I suggest to beginners is to go with the Anaconda distribution. As you might see in this image here, where my mouse cursor is pointing, you essentially have Conda, which is, you can think of it as an installation manager, which installs the most basic version of Python. Just above that, you have Miniconda, which is, I would say, like a lighter version of Python and some required packages or libraries. And you have this much bigger installation like called Anaconda, which installs Python and about 150 different libraries. It's not like you will be concerned with all of those 150 libraries, but the benefit of this is that you will find that 90-95% of your needs are satisfied because you've installed the largest superset of the available distributions, right? You also have things like PyCharm, ActiveState, which I've mentioned here. Feel free to visit and check them out on your own time. But for now, we will move to Anaconda, where I'm going to now open my computer to open the Anaconda website. So right there, what you'll see is it's essentially for data science. And if you go to products, if you go to individual edition, it's the open source version. And out here, you have the open source individual edition to perform Python or R data science machine learning on a single machine. It's developed for solo practitioners, equips you to work with thousands of open source packages and libraries. So what you would need to do is you would need to download it based on the architecture of your computers, right? So I, for instance, here I'm using a 64-bit Windows machine. So if I wanted to install it, I would download this version. For those of us who are using Mac, there's of course the Apple version, and so it is for people using any Linux distribution, whether it's Ubuntu or Mint or any of the other flavors, right? So I'm going to leave it here with regard to the installation part, because I'm pretty sure most of you would have done some kind of installations on your computers, whether it's an Adobe Acrobat or many other softwares, right? All right. So once you actually install Python on your systems, the question is how you access it. And to access it, you have again multiple ways. So just the way you have multiple options to install it, you also have multiple ways to access it. The least used way is using the command line interface, and that you could do by directly typing Python or IPython at the Anaconda prompt when you install it. So let me again show you my computer. If I click on the Windows Run feature and I go to Anaconda, so because I have installed Anaconda on my computer, you'll find that there are many different options here, including right at the top, it says Anaconda PowerShell prompt, Anaconda prompt, Jupyter Notebook, a bunch of different Jupyter Notebooks, Spider, and so on. So what I'm referring to here is the Anaconda, right? So if I were to click on this, let's give it a couple of seconds. And if I were to type Python here, it opens up Python, and I could say something like print, hello folks attending the webinar. And it prints it. So it's a pretty plain looking interface to use the Python programming language, but nevertheless, it is one of the ways used. Similarly, you could type IPython. I'm not going to do that here. I'll leave that for you when you want to try stuff out. Nevertheless, I have shown you a couple of screen grabs here, which would give you an idea of how the command line interface looks like. So this is for Python and this is for IPython. Similarly, you also have other ways like the Jupyter Notebook, which is what we'll use today. It's a browser-based interface that allows you to bring together code, output, explanations, all of that in a single file. I guess in popular software terms, you could imagine this to be something to the tune of having like this supersized Office file, which allows you to combine the power of Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint all in one single file, right? That's, I would say, the closest analogy that I can think of to what a Jupyter Notebook does. Jupyter Lab is kind of similar to that. And then you have the Spider IDE, which is a fourth way to access Python, which is a standard, I would say, programming environment that people who have used programming in other contexts before would prefer to use. So again, a screenshot of how Spider looks. We won't get into all of that, but nevertheless, should give you a sense of the fact that there are multiple ways to access. All right. Now let's talk about the libraries specific to Python. Now, the interesting thing about this language is that at its core, it's a pretty small language. But what gives it its power is these third-party libraries that latch on to Python and allow you to do all kinds of pretty crazy functionalities. So, for instance, specific to finance, I have shown a constellation of libraries that we use very frequently. So, for instance, you have NumPy, which is used for fast computation. You have Pandas, which is used for dealing with the financial market kind of data, which is daily data or data at higher frequencies, which is of a time series in nature. It's essentially observing a certain variable over a period of time. You have tools such as Keras, which is a deep learning package used for creating deep learning models. You have PyFolio, which is to give you ways to track your portfolio and various metrics to do with any kind of portfolios you create. You have Matplotlib for charts. You have TALib for technical analysis functions and so on. Right. So you have a bunch of different things you can do. I also want to add NSE-Pi is an interesting package specifically to automate downloads of data from the National Stock Exchange of India. So should give you a flavor of the kind of things we do. All right. So in fact, because of this whole manner in which this language works, what you will find when you start working with Python is the first thing you do when you start writing a program is you start importing the libraries that you want, right? So we are going to do that. We are going to start playing with a little bit of market data. And in order to do that, what I have done is I am going to open it in a Jupyter Notebook, right? As I mentioned just a little while earlier, there are 3 or 4 different ways to access it, and we are choosing to access it via what I call Jupyter Lab, right? So let's go to Jupyter Lab and let's specifically click on the file that I want to share with you guys. So among the libraries that come along with the Anaconda distribution, there are some which do not, which are not part of the standard version of Anaconda, and so we install certain things separately. For instance, if you want to install the Y Finance library, the way to install it is you use the command !pip install Y Finance, and if I were to run it, so this star, by the way, tells you that the operation is currently taking place. So while that happens, let me go and take a look at any questions. I hope I'm audible, guys, because I think I saw a couple of messages saying I was not audible. Could someone confirm if I'm audible, please? I am audible. All right. All right. Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So I just showed you the way to install a library. In this case, because we had to do this lecture, I had installed it. And so it tells you that requirement satisfied. And eventually it tells me that the library is already installed. Right. The next thing I want to do is I want to import a certain set of libraries. So I import some of the libraries I mentioned, NumPy, which is used for fast computation, Pandas, which helps manage financial market data. I import this library called DateTime, which helps me handle different types of date and time formats. Because when we download data from various places, dates can look pretty different. So sometimes people use the 3-letter short forms for day for months like MAR and JUN and stuff. Sometimes people use numbers like 3 and 6 for March and June respectively, and so on. So that's what DateTime helps us do. YFinance is a library which helps us automatically download data from Yahoo Finance. You have a specific package used for data visualization, and I'm also importing warnings so that I don't keep getting warned for some crazy stuff I do today, right? Okay. When I do something like DateTime or DateTime today, as the name suggests, it tells me what is today's date. Now, for those of us who have come from other programming languages, you find that Python code is often so intuitive that even someone who has never programmed can make a pretty good guess as to what that specific line is going to do. So something like DateTime.date.today, I think most people would guess that since it has the word today, it probably is going to give us today's date, and that's exactly what's happening, right? Okay, so let's first start with downloading some data. So we are going to work with the data of Netflix. So I create a variable called ticker1, give it the name NFLX, which is the ticker symbol for Netflix. I say that my end date needs to be today, and my start date needs to be end minus 365 into 10. So that's number of days. So essentially, I'm looking for the day which is 10 years from today, 10 years back from today. And in the final step, I say that I'm creating a variable called df1. Let's call that data frame 1. It's a short form for data frame, where I'm downloading Netflix from start to end. So I run it. It tells me it's completed. And then I do some customary checks on the downloaded data, right? So I check the first few rows by using the command head. So again, as the name suggests, head is essentially the top of the data. So it tells me I have data from 29th of August 2011, 30th August, 31st August and stuff. Gives me the details of open, high, low, close, adjusted close volume. This is typical market data where you have OH, LC, and V volumes, and also the adjusted close. Similarly, we want to check the last few rows, so we do a df.tail. So that gives us the data from 19th of August to 25th of August 2021. You can see, if you look at adjusted close, you can see that Netflix around 10 years back was at about $32, $33, and today it's at about $550 or so. Right? So obviously it's at this crazy appreciation over the last 10 years. For some of our Indian participants, let's also download the data for a pharmaceutical company, an famous Indian pharmaceutical company. It's called Cipla. I picked up pharma because we live in COVID time, so pharma companies are enormously interested for us to notice how they are faring. So I do the same thing that I did previously. This time I'm downloading the data for the last 15 years. One of the first things you guys might notice is that even fetching the data for 10 or 15 years, it takes like a matter of seconds, right? We run similar steps where we look at the head and the tail. So Cipla around August 2006 had an adjusted close price of around 227 to 240 rupees, and today it's at about 900 rupees or so, right? That's where adjusted close prices of Cipla are. We are going to do the same thing where we might want to. So we just saw the head and the tail. We did the same thing as previously. Let's try some other interesting stuff. So if we run something like dot shape, it's going to tell us how many rows and columns we have. So in the first case, that is in the case of Netflix, we have about 2,500 rows and 6 columns. So 2,500 rows is those many number of days of data we have. For Cipla, we have about 3,700 rows of data. You have other commands like info, which gives you some details on things like what the size of the this data set on your memory is. It's like 200 KB. None of them are zeros, so all of them are non-null. Non-null tells you that you actually have values there. You haven't lost any data there. The float that you see at the very end tells you that these are fractional numbers, and the volume is an integer. Right? So the float 64 and int 64 gives you some sense on what kinds of numbers they are. A df.describe gives you some, I would say, summary statistics on each column of the data that you have. So df1, let's do df1.describe. So it tells me things like the count, the mean, the standard deviation, the min, max, and the percentile values. So 25 percentile, 50 percentile, 75 percentile, and so on, right? Not that all of these values make sense all the time, but I wanted to show you this to tell you that all it takes is a short command to give you many summary statistics of as many columns as you have in a data set, right? So we've done some monkeying around with the data so far. Let's now do some visualization, because we are, human beings are visual creatures. These numbers and all of that are fine, but where we truly get a sense of what's going on is when we try to visualize, especially things like how the prices of a stock move, or the prices of an index move, right? So let's try to visualize the price data for Netflix. So we'll do 3 types of plots here: line plots, histograms, and scatter plots. Again, notice the kind of lines that we use here. So plt.figure, plt.plot. PLT is essentially, think of it as a short form for saying we are doing some sort of plotting. Here you specify the dimensions of your figure, you specify which column you specifically want to print, and you try to beautify it by giving it a title and some labels for the X and Y axis, right? So if we were to do this, it gives us the plot for Netflix for the last 10 years, right? From 2011 all the way up to 2021. So this is a pretty typical looking, plot for any kind of asset that we look at, right? So you can change this. I've made it adjusted close. You can just make it close. Let me make that close to. Looks kind of similar. We'll just leave it at that. Some other interesting things. So there's this very convenient function called percentage change pct underscore change, which helps you calculate percentage change between successive values. Now in finance, if you want to compute daily returns, in any case, you're looking at successive values of prices, whether it's adjusted close or close, right? So using a function like percentage change saves you the trouble of having to type out today minus yesterday divided by yesterday. And it's one of those nice shortcut functions that we use very often. So if we were to run this, it gives us the daily returns in percentage terms. So for instance, if you were looking at Cipla's daily returns on 31st of August 2006, it gave you a return of 1%. And that's because the price moved from 227.8 to 230.3. Similarly, 2.7%, 0.3%, and so on. Right? So you have these daily returns all over the place for Cipla. If you want to essentially visualize the histogram of the returns of Cipla, so let's change the number of things. So a histogram should give you like a distribution. Let me talk about what exactly the plot is. So here we are looking at the returns of the Cipla stock. And what you see on the y-axis is the number of times the returns were in a specific bin, right? So I kind of just divided it into 50 bins for one, I could make it like 20 bins too. So essentially what that does is it takes all the returns that I have on Cipla, daily returns, and divides it into equal sized, let's call it range, all right? So maybe 0 to 0.5%, 0.5 to 1, 1 to 1.5, and so on. With the x-axis having 0 here, and to the right of it, you can see percentage points all the way up to 5 and 10. Similarly on the y-axis. And what this tells you is that on most days, the returns were just at about a little over 0 and a little under 0. Slightly less than that, returns were negative about 800 odd days of the time, right? Where it was around, let's say, minus maybe half to about -1 or so. After that, between plus half to maybe plus 1.5 to plus 1 was about somewhere here, right? And so on. So it gives you a sense of how the returns of Cipla looked over the last 15 years. And then you have something like a scatter plot. So if I want to run a scatter plot of the high and low prices of the Netflix stock, I could do that by using plt.scatter. And not surprisingly, the scatter plot of high and low almost seems to have a correlation of 1, right? Say they all seem to lie on a single line. I don't want to get specifically into why they line up the way they do. This is more a demonstration of the power of Python, all right? Okay, so now I'm going to jump back into my slides. So we played a little bit with the market data to give us a sense of what we can do with in Python. Now let's talk about the steps that we need to actually build a quant trading strategy. It all starts with an idea. Now obviously one would wonder, where does this idea come from? Well, it could come from past experience, it could come from a newspaper report that you come across, your own research, maybe some academic research paper that you stumbled upon, some casual data analysis that you do where you spot this strange pattern somewhere, or it could be just a hunch where someone somewhere tells you that, you know what, I think IPOs on average make you money. So anytime you subscribe to a fresh IPO that comes out, try and subscribe to it and sell after maybe 3 days, and you will be in the green. So someone tells you that, and you just want to test it out and decide on whether you actually want to do that or not. So an idea could come from somewhere there, right? Once you get the idea, now it's about kind of trying to action it into something very concrete. So you need to think about what you want to buy, why you want to buy, and when you want to buy and sell. You need to decide the entry and exit conditions for each trade. Once you do that, once you have the idea in place and you decide on all of those things, such as the IPO example I gave. So you want to buy it right at the start, and you want to sell it maybe 2 or 3 days hence. So that helps you decide the entry and exit conditions. All right. So the next part is you want to convert or express all of these ideas in a language such as Python or any programming language. So you need to convert it, and that depends on how comfortable you are with the language. These days, we live in a glorious age where even if you can't program, there are many kinds of tools and functionalities these days which are integrated into trading platforms that help you build your strategy with minimal level of coding, right? So you could do that. Once you do that, you need to validate this kind of hypothesis that you had, that this specific strategy that you think is going to make money actually would have made money if you had put money maybe in the last 5 years or 10 years or what have you, right? So you want to gauge how it would have performed based on various metrics. So you would look at things like dollar PNL, how many profitable trades you had, Sharpe ratio, and a myriad other things. All right. Once you do that, the next step is pretty important, which is where you paper trade this strategy that you have. Now, when you paper trade, you're not actually putting real money. you are trying out these filter strategies on real market data. There are many ways to do it. These days, you have simulators or demo accounts on many brokers offer you that, so you can try it out there. So you're not actually buying or selling, but you're testing out what you believed would have worked in the past, now in the future. For those of us who have some statistical background, think of this as out of sample testing. So all the testing you did was within your sample. You now want to expand your reach and see whether all the things that you came to conclusions or inferred on your sample, does it operate well outside of your sample? And once you've done all of that, you then launch a strategy in the wild, in the live markets, and monitor its performance and manage risks as the case may be, right? So the way it works is you start with a bunch of ideas, and by the time you reach the backtesting stage, you'll find that many of those ideas have dropped by the wayside. So you end up with maybe 1 in 4 or 5 strategies that you thought of have actually passed those filters and reached this backtesting stage. Those 20 or 25% strategies that you have left, you paper trail, and you'll find maybe half of them also drop off. And eventually, what you end up with is maybe 1 in 8 to 10 ideas is actually worth the risk of launching in a live market, right? So this is typically how it goes. These steps are, I would say, indicative. They are often, there's a lot of back and forth that happens between these steps. I wouldn't call it entirely linear. It is linear to an extent, but there's like I said, we go back to the drawing board more often than we'd like. All right. Now the question is, what data do we use when we do all of these things? Well, in terms of data, there are, again, in this day and age, we have so many different types of data sets that we can use or refer to, and some of it also boils down to our personal preferences. So I would say the first big data set that you have is market data, which is the kind of stuff that we just looked at when we downloaded it. So it's price, volume, open interest, all of those kind of things. This happens day in and day out as when markets are operational. I would also say that this is at the highest frequency. So in terms of price data, you can literally get daily data at 15-minute intervals, 10-minute, 5-minute, minute, and even higher frequencies, right? In terms of sheer volume, it's one of the largest potential data sets that you have access to. This also depends on the kind of arrangement you have with your broker or any kind of data vendor in terms of the frequency of data that you eventually have access to via your programming tools. The second big category is fundamental data. Now this, when I say company specific, this is essentially accounting data. So the kind of financial statements that companies put out, balance sheets, income statements, these happen at a much lower frequency because companies come out with annual financial statements and I would say provisional quarterly numbers, right? So the proper audited numbers happen usually just once a year, and the ones that happen at the end of each quarter are often revised when the next quarter comes about. Nevertheless, that's one source of data that one can have access to. There's also macroeconomic data such as GDP numbers, inflation numbers, employment numbers, interest rates, and so on. A lot of market activity is closely linked with expectations around these kind of numbers. And again, some of us who call ourselves fundamental analysts, right? We have this predilection towards data of this sort. Now, even folks who like that can use an automated way to, I would say, at the very least, scale up their own operations because they can automate parts of their workflow. They needn't automate everything end to end, but even partial analysis part, if you're able to automate, you'll find that you're able to increase the universe of assets that you look at simply because you have managed to add a fair amount of automation to some of the more routine tasks that you did. All right, the third broad category are technical indicators. So again, some of us who are technical analysts use things like moving averages, Bollinger Bands, RSI, and so many other indicators, which is also derived from market data, but nevertheless it kind of stands on its own because many people use them in order to come up with buy and sell decisions. This, I would say, comes under the category of technical analysis, and there's scope for even people who call themselves technical analysts to automate parts of their work, similar to what I had spoken about before. And the fourth, and I would say the relatively untapped source of data these days, is alternative data. So this is data where we try to gauge the sentiment or gauge the mood on a particular asset based on the news reports that are getting churned out on that specific organization or on that specific asset, whether it's via social media such as Twitter and Instagram and Facebook posts and others. There's also mainstream media that we're talking about. There's business news and stuff, and you also have alternative data which involves the usage of satellite imagery in order to use that as a proxy for other kind of things. So for instance, satellite imagery on the amount of lights that are being lit in different parts of the world during the night time is a proxy for the kind of GDP activity that happens in those specific economic zones. Or the satellite data on how full parking lots are in some of these big box retailers gives you a sense of the amount of consumption demand that's happening at big box retailers like a Walmart or a Carrefour or others, right? So these are also getting kind of factored in when people want to use it in order to make forecasts or predictions of what's going to happen with financial assets that are traded. All right, so I think now I'm going to jump to back to my notebook where we will backtest a sample trading strategy on my workstation. So let me go here. And first, let me clear all my output because I was trying some stuff and I forgot to clear it before our lecture. All right, so because of that, I need to reload all my libraries. Okay, my libraries are loaded. All right, so I'm now going to jump straight into the sample strategy. So the sample strategy that I have come up with for this specific lecture, I chose it entirely arbitrarily, considering the scope of whatever we wanted to cover. I didn't think we have enough time to literally work our way to a strategy, so I picked one more from a demonstration of Python point of view, right? So here what we want to do is we decide to follow these following steps that this one could think of this more as maybe like a mean reversion approach to how assets move. So what we decide is that we will buy the stock on the 4th day at open. If the stock closes, actually it's down, not up. So if a stock closes down consecutively for 3 days, we want to buy it at the open on the 4th day and we want to sell it on the 5th day. So essentially what we're saying is, so day 1, it closes at say 100. Day 2, it closes at 95. So it's closed down. Day 3 closes at 93. So that second day consecutively is closed down. Day 4 it closes at 90. So it's another day it's closed down. If that's what happens, on the morning of the 4th day, we decide to buy it and sell it on the morning of the 5th day, right? Now, just based on what we are trying to do here, this kind of approach would be good for stocks that have not been doing well maybe in the past 10 or 15 years. All right. So let's imagine we are going to repeat this on or run this strategy for the past 10 or 15 years. So when I looked at this, I was thinking about stocks that have done pretty terribly in the last 5 or 10 years. You do a web search and you'll find many such options in different markets around the world. So in India, we have a pretty big telecom company, which is actually part of Vodafone. And this stock hasn't been doing well for the last 10 odd years. So I decided to pick it to see what would happen if I had done something like this and operated it for the last 10 years. So imagine that I'm running this on Idea, which is a joint venture that Vodafone has with another company. So the stock is called Idea. We look at it from Jan 2010 till July 2021. That's what I'm doing here. I'm downloading all of that data. And then I create a copy of the data that I download and I work with it, right? So I create open to open returns. So I'm essentially looking at the returns between at the open yesterday and at the open today. Similarly, I'm creating close to close returns. So I'm looking at the difference between today's close and yesterday's close. Now you'll notice that I've used np.log. So I'm using the difference of log prices as a proxy for returns, because that is another way to compute returns aside from today minus yesterday divided by yesterday. We can also just take log of today's price minus log of yesterday's price is similarly going to give you returns for that day or for that period, right? So that's what I'm doing. I then want to generate trading signals. So I first look at wanting day 1 to be a down day, day 2 should be a down day, day 3 should be a down day, and I buy at open on day 4. So in order to do that, I encoded saying that if the returns on the first day, so I essentially use the dot shift operator to look at returns yesterday. So dot shift 1 tells you I'm looking at yesterday's returns. Dot shift 2 tells you I'm looking at the returns 2 days back. And dot shift 3 tells you I'm looking at the returns 3 days back. So essentially, this is just a way to access returns a few days back. So if I did dot shift 5, it's the returns 5 days ago, right? So I'm saying that I need these returns to be less than 0 for yesterday, for day before yesterday, and the day before that. And you'll notice I've used the ampersand operator. So what that tells you is all 3 conditions need to be satisfied. So I say yesterday's returns and day before yesterday's returns and the day before that, all 3 days need to be negative. If that is so, I encode it as 1, else I encode it as 0. So I create this new column called signals, which essentially is creating this new column. And so I get the signal on a specific day. However, the signal is going to be operationalized the next day, right? Because I'm going to buy on the next day, and that's essentially what I'm doing at the next step. And once I do that, I want to compute the strategy returns. So I do all of these operations, and it tells me that if I had done a buy and hold, I would have essentially lost money. And the strategy, on the other hand, is going to give me a return of about 64%, right? So if I were to, let's say, plot this, what I will get is that my strategy itself gives me this orange line, and the buy and hold would have been pretty bad, right? I would have essentially lost money, and I would have continued to bleed money because of the nature of what happened to this stock. Now, as I said, an approach like this works for stocks that have done terribly, right? So let's say I had chosen Netflix here instead. So if I had done this whole thing with Netflix, what it tells you is my strategy would have done quite terrible. So I would have ended up losing money. I would have lost about 7% over 10 years. Whereas if I had done a buy and hold, I would have, quadrupled my money. I would have got returns of, so this essentially is telling you the number of times it got multiplied. So it's 4 times of what I would have actually got, right? So this is, a classic case of how a strategy is not like this magic mantra that's going to work on every stock for every single time, right? This specific approach would work in cases where companies are not doing well, right? So you want to use an approach like this for firms who have been some of the worst performing stocks in the particular exchange that you're looking at. So you can substitute this with Amazon or Microsoft, or if you're looking at maybe in the Indian context, if I were to substitute it with, let's say, an Infy.ns, which is one of the largest IT companies here, you'll find that the strategy has done pretty terribly, right? So if I plot it, it would show me that the strategy done has, by the way, in this case, which line is for the strategy and which line is for buy and hold? You guys want to take a guess? Is my audio not there? I again see some people saying that they can't hear me.
We can hear you, Vivek.
Okay. So, okay, so some are saying blue is the strategy, some are saying yellow is the strategy. So as it turns out, it's actually the orange or the yellow one which is the strategy, right? Blue is the buy and hold approach. So essentially what this tells you is that, so I haven't labeled them, which is why it kind of is a little confusing. But nevertheless, in this case, buy and hold would have been a much better option. We are talking about a company that did very well in the last 10 odd years. And this specific strategy is really ill suited for firms such as those. An approach where you're looking for firms that keep going down and you're trying to profit when they have these short bursts when they go up would tend to be firms that have done quite badly in the markets, right? So this is to give you some sense of how you could try things out. Out here, I could just keep changing the ticker. For those of us who've done programming before, you could run a for loop and keep changing the tickers here in order to compute what your buy and hold versus strategy returns would be, right? So this is again, as far as running all of this stuff on a workstation, on my own computer. Well, you can actually take it up a notch by trying it on Blueshift, which I spoke about, which is one of our cloud-based research and trading platform. So I've opened here the docs page of Blueshift. It's essentially a platform for you to research and trade systematic investment strategies. What you can do and what it does is it gives you access to a lot of data over the cloud up to minute level on Indian and US markets. It also gives you access to some of the Forex data, right? So you can use factor strategies, technical indicators, machine learning, you can do all of this stuff. And specifically for this lecture, I have 2 things I want to show you guys. So let me first show you a scanner for technical indicators, right? So in case you're wondering where I got this from, you can do a web search for Blueshift GitHub, right? So you can go create a free account on Blueshift, and if you go to the GitHub page of Blueshift, there are many different demo strategies that you can pick from here. And so for instance, you have it in different categories. You have equities, events, factors, and so on. If you go to equities, I went and picked the one called Market Scanner. So what Market Scanner does is it scans the Nifty 500 universe and prints the top and bottom stocks sorted by their latest RSI numbers. So for those of us who don't know what RSI is, it's a technical indicator which gives you a sense of how much a stock is getting bought or sold. So what a very high number tells you is that it's overbought, and the indicator essentially tells you it's time to sell. And if the number is very low, it tells you that it's oversold and it's time to buy, right? So this is done every day, 30 minutes after markets open. It's a technical indicator. You can run it on equities, futures, ETFs, currencies, and you can run it on daily data. So all I've done is I have, in fact, let me just do that again. I will copy paste this entire code. We don't have time to go through the code line by line, but we can look at the output because that should give us some interesting insights. So I will copy paste it here because right at the top it says that this can be run on daily NSE data. So I'm going to select, so you will notice here that I have multiple options for the data set, NSE daily, NSE minute, NYSE daily and stuff. I'll check NSE daily. I will maybe select, let's say, the month of July 2021. So maybe from 1st of July to say 15th of July for 15 days, and I run it. Now notice this, guys, this is just a scanner, all right? It's not a strategy, it's a scanner. However, the scanner itself can give you some interesting inputs which you might want to use later. So if I were to look at the logs that are getting created here, it is telling me the stocks that had the highest RSI and the lowest RSI. So on 1st of July, based on whatever is happening here, it tells me that the stocks with the highest RSI were AstraZeneca, Adani, and a few other companies, and Infi, Persistent, and others had really low RSI. And I could essentially take a look at these lists and maybe do some analysis on this list instead, right? I could use that as my input in order to come up with some trading strategy. So I use this as a scanner for which becomes an input for something else that I may have in. If I go to strategies, there was this other thing that I wanted to discuss here. Test 2, right? So test 2 again, I picked it up directly from here for the sake of this class. What I did here was, I think I picked it up from demo Bollinger, was it? Picked it up from Forex. So if you go to Forex, there is also a demo Bollinger strategy on Forex, which I picked up and I have run here. So it tells you it's a Bollinger Band strategy, a long short strategy based on Bollinger Bands, breakout signals. We square off positions at the end of the day to avoid rollover costs. Trade size is fixed, and you can read all of this stuff. And essentially, it tells you you're supposed to run it on minute level data of FX. So I select Forex minute level data and say I run it. So this is going to run literally every minute. So maybe we'll run it for first 6 to 8 months of this year. Maybe let's make it 20th August. Right. So notice how things here are slightly different from what we were doing on our own workstations. Out here, what is happening is, first of all, you have a lot of access to demo strategies. And even if we don't make any changes to it, for those of us who want to check out what's actually happening, you can try and read through this. So for instance, here, the universe includes the AUD, USD, the Euro and the Swiss franc, the Euro and the Japanese yen, and so on. So these are the securities you're looking at. You're defining certain strategy parameters and deciding on exactly what happens by setting up different variables like trading costs and things like that, right? Now, when you run it, it tells you that the blue line is the portfolio that you're creating with the currencies based on Bollinger Bands, and the orange line is the benchmark, which, as you can see, faces some pretty insane drawdowns, right? Some crazy drawdowns that especially happened in the months of May and June. Whereas your portfolio itself is it's quite steady, right? So if you want to do a more detailed backtest, so you can do a slightly more detailed backtest by clicking on New Backtest. This is what is called a quick run. And let's see what happens. It's processing it. So again, we'll give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so this is done. All right, so we essentially started off with a capital of 10,000 and we end up with 10,237. It gives us some stats such as annual returns, cumulative returns, volatility, Sharpe ratio, and a host of other things. If you go to the tear sheet, it gives you some even more interesting information. So this gives you a histogram, which is similar to what we created. So it tells you how your returns looked over the last several days. So this was about maybe 200 days or so. It tells you that most days you were getting between 0 and between 0.1 and 0.2%. Similarly, between 0 and 0.1% and stuff. So you get some details here. It gives you an idea of the drawdown. And interestingly, this particular strategy, the Bollinger Band on FX, hardly had a drawdown of about 0.5% over the last 6 to 8 months. You get an idea of how the monthly performances also are. So here, because we just tried it for about 6-7 months, you only see 2021. You can try it on longer time periods. You could do things like looking at things like the Sharpe ratio, alpha, beta, and whatnot. If you look at transactions, it tells you what you did. So you on Monday, Jan 4th at 9:45, you bought 1,000 quantities of AUD USD, you bought NZD USD, and so on, right? So it gives you an idea of what you've been transacting, considering that you have a capital of 10,000 that we selected at the very beginning. So in other words, what this platform allows you to do is it allows you to try stuff out and test it by running these kind of back tests. There's also the option of doing some sort of, I would say, taking things live directly from here, which at least for today, I'm going to steer clear of. But I would encourage you to try it out yourself when you maybe try this on your own time. So towards the end, I want to talk about a couple of things. Is that all it takes to get started with respect to automating your trades? So the answer is it's very much a no. And the reason is that this domain that we're talking about, quant finance algo trading, is an interdisciplinary field. You have a combination of math and stats, financial markets, and programming. So I would say you don't need to be like an expert in all three, but you definitely need to have some degree of comfort in all of them. I would imagine that at least those of us who are traders would be quite comfortable in financial markets, but we are slightly lacking in our knowledge in the other two domains. So we need to amp up a little bit, at least in both these areas. The good news is, at least with respect to programming, even basic level programming should help you get started because of all these additional tools that are available these days. Even Blueshift that I showed you has this mode of visual programming where you use it, you kind of can try to do things without actually typing any lines of code. These kind of, I would say aids come at a cost because it doesn't give you the kind of flexibility that you would have if you were doing it entirely by yourself. So, like I said, you could begin that way, but you should allow yourself gradually to pick up at least a level of programming where you are able to edit or look at someone else's program and make changes as per your own needs. Right? There are obviously parts that I haven't touched upon. So the backtests that we ran, both on the workstation as well as on Blueshift, are obviously just a starting point. I literally chose these strategies arbitrarily. There was no, I didn't arrive at them by any means. In reality, as I said, it takes a lot of effort to find durable and consistently profitable strategies. The next thing is, can we rely on the results of the backtest we ran? Certainly no, because we've made some very simplifying assumptions. So especially the one that I ran on my own computer, you make these assumptions like buying and selling at open or close. We know that realistically this is not possible for retail traders for sure, right? Because there's a certain amount of slippage that comes into play. There's also transaction costs, taxes, brokerage, all of these things that come into play. And what we do get is a taste of things that can be done. And as we get more comfortable, right, we start adding that dose of realism to our own models. So it's like we begin with a toy model, and then we layer it with real world implications after we get a working toy model, right? So the key is to create eventually a portfolio of strategies, which should together give us reliable returns. So you're never going to find like this silver bullet, which is going to make you money come rain or shine, right? You need to create a portfolio. Some of them will work in volatile markets, some would work in tranquil markets, and eventually you hope to get consistent alpha by having this portfolio that works at different times, right? So to kind of end my presentation, I just want to say that algo trading doesn't need to be complicated. You can actually come up with some very simple ideas. It could just involve moving averages, and you could come up with great ideas, especially at retail level, just using things like moving averages and Bollinger Bands, RSIs. Even those things should give you some pretty profitable ideas, right? The third point I want to make is, if you are wanting to make that move, make realistic plans. Do not, fantasize that you will make everything so automated that you just set your algos and your programs to run, and you go to the beach and put your feet up and get a couple of beers and sunbathe all day. No, that's not going to happen, because it takes a lot of effort to even get to that point. And even when you get to that point, it takes a certain amount of monitoring that we need, right? Coming specifically to the realistic plans that I spoke about, I would say one should look at automating their workflow part by part. For example, I think some of the lower hanging fruit would be if you can automate at least the scanning of assets. So your actual trades would still be done by your own clicks with buys and sells, but the number of assets that you track, that part, you can scan it. And when I say scanning it, based on whichever data you like, whether it's market data, it's fundamental data, or any other types of data sets, or even a combination, use that to increase the number of assets you scan. So for instance, on Blueshift, I showed you guys the way you can use a demo scanner just to pick the top 5 RSI and the bottom 5 RSI, something like that, right? The scanning is done by a program for you, and you use that in order to decide what you will do the very next day. There are no shortcuts with regard to finding a way to make money here. And at the end of the day, just think of this as a marathon that you're running. You're not like in a 100-meter dash where you just speed for like 10 seconds and you'll be done, right? So that's pretty much it with regard to this. And if any of this stuff interests you, I would encourage you to go check out some of the free things we have on our website. We have a lot of free stuff. There are books by Gordon Steve. 2 of them are written by yours truly with some of my colleagues. There are several interactive courses on Contra. There's Blueshift, which I just showed you guys. It's a research and training platform. There are many blogs also that we have, which cover various aspects of the field. And I think I have time to look at a few questions that have come my way. Right? So I would tell you that some of the questions that have not gotten answered, even if so it's not possible for me to take up everything, but I will try to answer at least a few of them, and the remaining we will try and get in touch with you over mail or something, right?
Yes, Thanks, Vivek, for such a wonderful presentation. And we'll just start off with Q&A. But before that, just wanted to share. I think a list of free resources are there, which are there from Quantancy, free ebooks, on Blue Shift platform, and then various blogs where you can learn a lot. And in case if you really want to get into algorithmic trading, uh, uh, and you are very serious about it, and you want to improve your trading with the help of technology, uh, uh, I just shared a link of counseling call. So basically, you can connect with our EPAT counselors, so they can help you understand how our EPAT program, which is a 6 month long course on algorithmic trading, can help you with your learning objectives. So it could be getting a job, it could be improving your existing trading strategies, it could be anything else, like whatever your objective is. So this the program that we have, EPAC, covers A to Z about algorithmic trading. And what you're seeing here in the presentation, as rightly mentioned by Vivek, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. There is a lot that can be done, and a lot that can help you improve your trading in day to day. So yeah, I think now we can start off with Q&A. Given that we are limited on time, uh, I think there are a few questions which we can pick. In case if your question is not picked, make sure that you share your questions at the end of this webinar. You will get a survey form. Share your feedback about this session and ask all your doubts which you have, and we'll make sure that all your questions are going to get answered. So, Vivek, is there any interesting question that you want to start off with?
Yeah, so I'm going to pick a few, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick a few, considering the time we have. So a question we've received is, does the Blue Shift platform have historic earnings data? No, there is no earnings data. The answer to that is a very short one. It's just, the answer is no. Okay, I keep getting messages that I'm not being heard. Kshitij, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you clearly.
Okay, all right. I believe I saw a question which someone asked whether if someone who has IT background and not much knowledge of financial markets and statistics, can you go for it? Yes, absolutely, Bhavish. So it's like this, guys. Some of us have we are technically quite comfortable, but we are not so comfortable with the other domains. For people like that, you will find that you spend more time on the things where you are not comfortable. Similarly, I have seen students who are very comfortable with finance, but who are not so well versed with stats as well as programming, and they devote a big chunk of their time in the initial few months specifically on amping up their own programming skills. And at the end of the day, I think what you need more than anything else is that interest. If you have the interest, everything else can be worked with. You need interest and you need patience. That's the other thing. So there is really no kind of get rich quick options here. We are preparing ourselves for the next 5 to 10 years. We are not preparing ourselves for the next few months. For those of us who want to be invested in the markets for the next 10, 20 years, I think and you're ready to put in some time, 6, 7 months, you'll get there. I can assure you, you'll get there. I've seen it with hundreds of students in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been around in Quant Institute. Okay, I'm trying to see if I can find more questions. Maybe I'll take one more.
So meanwhile, Vivek picks the last question. I see a lot of questions about this webinar being available as a recording. Yes, this webinar is going to be available on our YouTube channel. So in the next 2 days, all the webinar attendees and registrants are going to get an email from our side with the link to the webinar recording.
Okay, I'm going to take the last question. Is the Blueshift Cloud platform open to all? Yes, it is open to all. It's free. All you need to do is go there and register, and you have access to. In fact, let me just go to the screen where it will give you an idea of the kind of data that you have. So if you see here, it says it is we support multiple asset classes and instruments like FX, equities, future. And if you go to data sets, it tells you specifically the data sets that are available. So at present, we have the following data sets available, which is equities market data for NYSE and NSE, minute level with corporate actions, updated once every day after market close. We have equities market data again, end of day with corporate actions. We have FX data for 10 currency pairs. Also have companion data, right? So these are the things that are available. You can check out the documentation and you'll find answers there. I think that's pretty much it with regard to questions that I'll be looking at today. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your time. I hope you managed to get at least some value out of this time that you've spent today, nearly 1 hour and 20 minutes. That's it from me. I'm signing off. Thank you to my organizers also.
Thank you, Vivek.
And,
thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Vivek. It was 1 hour 20 minute session, but it was very interactive, and we actually saw a lot of helpful stuff, and you showcased, by going through various strategies and showcasing how we can use those demo strategies and how we can use scanners and everything. So a lot of us learned so many new things today, and I hope our audience, who are inspiring, who are aspiring to become, apply quant trading in their in their trading strategies, are going to get a lot of value from today's session. So thanks again for taking your time out and showcasing all these various strategies. And I would also like to thank our audience for for participating in this session and asking out all your questions. And before we conclude, just wanted to share, if your questions are not answered, I again repeat, just make sure that your questions are asked in the survey form that you are going to receive right after this, and we will be making sure that all the questions will be addressed. Meanwhile, I would also like to share that we'll be keep on coming with more such webinars, and in the survey, you will going to get an option where you can suggest what all topics you would like to attend in future, and we'll make sure that we conduct webinars on those topics as well. So with that, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day ahead. Bye bye.